Again, welcome everyone to our second gathering, our second class in this series on the Buddha's suttas, these early, sort of the earliest canon, C-A-N-O-N, of the Buddha. But yet, as we see, the teachings in them are really the basis of all the Buddhist schools, of which there are many. The class from last week is posted, and you can go to the website, to the calendar, to where the class description is, and you'll see it listed, so I won't go into it in depth. But just very quickly, because even those of us who were here last week, memory seems to be an issue for many of us, trying to remember what it was we were. Sometimes we forget what we're doing even as we're doing it. So we really focused last week on the Buddha's accounts of his own spiritual search. Does this ring a bell? And he talked about that there were ignoble ways and there were noble ways, and he was seeking a noble way. Because he said there are many paths, but many of them are either taught by people who don't have much realization or have the same kind of problems that we have, or aren't too far advanced, or else they're really more in terms of the benefits, the fruits that are gained are fruits and benefits that are primarily of a worldly nature and not of a transcendent nature. And if you remember, the Buddha was on a search for transcendence. Transcendence of what? Transcendence of suffering. So he lets us know that he was on a noble search. And if you remember from last week, like many of us, when he began his search, and again, he was motivated not only by the experience of seeing suffering in his own hometown, and really seeing it for the first time, sickness, old age, and death, really the impermanence of everything. Hit him quite home, since his whole life was based on seeking happiness in the good things of his life, to find out that none of them were real in any kind of permanent way, including his own body. He went on an existential search for meaning, for purpose, for something that transcended the world. And we'll talk more about that. And if you remember, he did what many of us did. He sought out the leading teachers of his time. The people said, oh, go to this teacher, he's a great teacher. And so he went to, and he talks about 3 different teachers he went to. And he went to them very humbly. He asked them for teaching. He asked them primarily for meditative practice. They taught him, and he practiced. And he did say, of course, first, he listened to their teachings and intellectually got it. But he really wanted a realization, so he entered the meditative tradition of each of his teachers. And what he found was, while all of them taught the jhanas, or these deep trance states of experience, in which when he was in the trance state, he had great oceanic feelings of calmness and peace and oneness, all the things that we seek and people seek. And yet, because they were kind of what we might call today state-specific, in other words, when he wasn't in that samadhi state, it was back to the world of duality and separation and self, he knew that there was more. And if you remember, after kind of getting frustrated that he wasn't getting it with these teachers, frustration's my own word, but just not feeling that his yearning was being answered, he decided, I know what I'll do. I'll just crush my small mind. I'll just crush the self, right? And if you remember, he went on this very strong ascetic, internally and externally. He'll just crush his body. He'll just crush his needs. He'll just crush his desires. The descriptions of him gritting his teeth and pressing his tongue against his teeth, and anyhow, and basically, getting down to almost eating nothing, just in any way denying. And then if you remember, he had this memory that when he was a teenager, under a tree during a planting festival, and I won't go into it, but basically, very naturally by himself, he went into a deep state of samadhi, you know. And he was quite taken that it happened so easily and naturally. And here he has been working so hard. So he sort of had the sense then, it's all in me. You know, it's all right here. You know, why am I going out searching here, searching there, or trying to destroy my body and all that? That's not the problem. The problem is within my own mind. And so if you remember, he begins to take food and gets stronger and stronger, meditates and meditates. And finally, he has what's called the Great Enlightenment. I won't go into it. He described it in the sutra we read last week. But the interesting thing is, not only did he go through deeper and deeper and deeper states of meditation and really experience the fundamental, pure, uncontaminated nature of his mind, which we might call Buddha nature, you know, beyond birth, beyond death, you know, all those transcendental qualities. But that was only sort of like the entrance into it. He also then explained that it really was not only that fundamental experience of the empty, pure nature of his mind, but that he used that clarity and strength of mind to understand things. And if you remember, one of the things he understood was all his past lifetimes. He could see this endless unfolding, lifetime after lifetime, purification after purification within himself. That was the first kind of great insight he had, which is about karma, you know. So it's important that we understand that enlightenment is not only an experience, but it's about understanding reality, how it really is. And that's what he's saying. He understood. He only not understood the nature of his mind, but he understood the nature of how this whole, for at least for a better word, our whole world system comes into beings, comes into being. And so he not only understood it within himself, but secondly, he had the omniscient quality. He could see all the causes and conditions in past lifetimes of every person. You know, it sounds unbelievable, but I think the key, what we might say, takeaway for him was that he saw that it was causes and conditions, actions of people's body, speech, and mind, which was propelling them in a life, lifetime after lifetime. And it was based on the wholesome or unwholesome nature of those actions of body, speech, and mind, which were propelling people endlessly, right? You know, there was no out, as long as they continually misperceived what reality is about. These are the three knowledges. And then the third knowledge, and I just want to read here. When my mind was thus concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability. Sound good? So that was the basis of his mind when he did, we might call this deep looking into the nature of the unfolding reality. He then saw, he directed it now after seeing causes and conditions, his own, all beings. I wanted to know the knowledge of the destruction of affliction. So you can see his purpose was not just his own freedom, his own liberation, his own happiness and well-being. He wanted to understand deeply what it means to human beings and why human beings do what they do. And especially, and again, it was his initial concern, why do people suffer? And why do they create suffering for each other? Right? It's kind of dumbfounding, right? We look at the world, we look at human beings, we read and we just see, endlessly, why do people, themselves live in such pain and cause others such pain? Even, it's like, why is that, It seems so reasonable to think that human beings could be rational and work things out, right? Is that true? No. People can live at peace with one another because of the afflictions in their mind. And so this is where he saw more deeply what suffering was, the cause of it, what that it can end, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering. And so I knew it exactly, the whole process of the coming into being of afflictions and the way leading to the cessation. And when I knew and saw this, my mind was liberated from the taint of all desire, the taint of existence, and the taint of ignorance. My mind was liberated, it came knowledge. I knew then I was liberated. The spiritual life has now been lived. There is no more need to be done. And so in the third true knowledge attained by me in the last watch of the night, ignorance was banished, true knowledge arose, darkness was banished, light arose, as happens in one who dwells diligent, ardent, and resolute. So, we may not be the Buddha at that level, but he's giving the characteristics of the mind: diligent, ardent, and resolute. And to me, those words, again, in terms of our own spiritual search, in terms of our own path, in terms of our own desire for awakening, transformation, healing, whatever we want to call it, to ask ourselves, are those qualities of mind, which are not, all understandable, they're not metaphysical, they're not esoteric, is there diligence in my practice, in my commitment? Am I ardent? There's a lot of sincerity, there's a lot of heart, there's a lot of enthusiasm. And am I resolute? Do I, day after day, hour after hour, am I dogged in terms of this transformation? So that's very quickly what we talked about, and then you remember he went through that whole thing: do I teach? Do I not teach? Who's going to be interested in this? Sentient beings, very busy, on social media, who's going to be interested? So, but you remember that famous line: there are people where the dust of the world lies light upon their eyelids. There will be people who will be interested. So when he heard that, he did go forward. Now, this is one of his most famous discourse. It's the turning of the wheel. So this is the discourse of when he comes to Sarnath. Remember those 5 ascetics who gave him up because he was now, eating, which they considered, the lap of luxury. So they had all departed from him, and he thought, I will begin with them. Right? Thus have I heard. This is the first discourse. On one occasion, the Buddha was dwelling at Varanasi in the Deer Park, and then he addressed the monks of this group of 5 thus: Monks, these 2 extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness. Which 2? The pursuit of sensual happiness and sensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, the way of worldlings, ignoble, unbeneficial, and the pursuit of self-mortification, which is painful, ignoble, unbeneficial. Without veering toward either of the extremes, the Tathagata, which is an epithet for himself, has awakened to the middle way, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nirvana. Okay? So, it may not sound to us, very extreme, what he's saying, this middle way, but please remember, at his time, there was sort of, in India at that time, there was sort of two paths. One was the path of, we might call, the householder, that's us, and this is not a very high opinion of householders. Like we just live for pleasure, we just live for fun, that's what life's about, right? The path of pleasure, right? And then the other path was the path of renunciation. We just renounce pleasure, we renounce all those things of life. And the Buddha said, these two are extremes. Neither extreme will lead to true happiness, true peace, true understanding. So this is very important. He really is enunciating, I am teaching now a different way that is unknown in the society of his time. Okay, is that clear? So it may not sound to us, very extraordinary, but he was really delineating that he had found another way, right? That one can transform, which did not have to do with these types of extremes. And what is that middle way awakened, that I've awakened to? It is this, the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort. We'll talk about these. Right mindfulness, right concentration. This, monks, is the middle way awakened by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision. Very important. So, I've often said, the Buddha just had a great enlightenment, great transformation. He's in 7 weeks of just bliss, right? Everything is blown up, and all his conditioning, all his thoughts, all his duality, all blown out. He just has this transcendent, open, spacious, vast mind that has profound insight into everything. Right? Now, what's the first thing he's going to teach? You'd think he'd go right for that, right? But it's interesting that he doesn't. So the fact that there is really so much he could teach, but this is where he begins, I think is very instructive, and it shows how concerned he was about human beings and how and why they cause suffering to themselves for no reason. Right? That their suffering so much is self-created. Right? So I think this, to me, is very instructive, and it behooves all of us, especially those of us who many people think, I want to practice Zen, I want to practice Dzogchen, I want to practice meditation, But look where he begins, you see. Very human. Suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the path that leads from the suffering. And he says, this is the basis of my path. This is really what it's about. And then he goes on to describe, thus, this is the noble truth of suffering. Now, noble means what? Highest, most important. The truth that has the most reality to it, that's most worthy of respect. Many truths, this is a noble truth. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering. Union with what is displeasing is suffering. Separation from what is pleasing is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. In brief, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. Okay? So he defines what suffering is. And he basically describes the human condition, right? The human condition is birth. Now, why does he say birth is suffering? Because we know for most women, traditionally giving birth was a very painful experience. Very, very painful. And life could be painful. Getting sick is painful. Getting diseased is painful, is suffering. Aging is suffering. And death is suffering. Right? Because it prevents us from living with the expectation that things will be good. Things will be fine. My body is healthy. I'll always have a healthy body, right? My body is young. It will always stay young. My life here is permanent and the people I'm involved with are permanent. No, right? But then he goes on to call, getting what we don't want. Anybody ever get what they don't want? It happens all the time. But that's suffering because it doesn't make us happy. Right? Being separated from that which we want, that's suffering. Right? Wanting something and not getting it is suffering. Right? So, when he says clinging to the 5 aggregates, that's another whole thing, but basically it means all our clinging, all our attachments to our bodies, to our thoughts, to our perceptions, to our feelings, to our identity, all that clinging, all that attachment, all that identification that we do, we are fundamentally setting us up for what? Suffering. Now, suffering is a translation of the word dukkha. And dukkha has many translations. I mean, some people translate it as that life is fundamentally unsatisfactory, which is not quite as strong as suffering. Suffering makes us think, tears and angst, but dissatisfaction. Why are human beings fundamentally dissatisfied? Anybody ever been dissatisfied? It's a chronic condition. Why are we dissatisfied? Anybody ever been dissatisfied? Why are we dissatisfied? Yeah, because we're not getting what we want, and what we want doesn't stay, and we're getting what we don't want, and whether it's personal or for our loved ones or for the world. I mean, why do people, open up their news in the morning and everybody is so agitated, right? Because we're getting news that we don't want. But when we get news that we want, we're what? Happy. Unfortunately, 3 days later, it's not like that. So this endless change, you see, this endless instability, the Buddha said it's fundamentally unsatisfying. There's no permanent satisfaction. There's no peace of mind in any of that. So he basically looked at what for him had been ordinary life, and now he understands living that way with attachment, aversion, and not understanding how things really are, that he called that dukkha, he called that suffering. Right. Now, then he defines, because if he just kind of laid it all out, it wouldn't be very optimistic or hopeful, would it? Life is suffering, grin and bear it. I mean, that would not be, right? But he goes to an interesting thing. Then you think, I think we would go, all right, well, tell me what to do, right? That's what we would say. All right, tell me what to do. I don't want to suffer anymore. Tell me what to do. But he doesn't do that. His second noble truth is understand the cause. Because when you understand the cause, you understand how to change. And he wants us to know how we human beings cause ourselves to suffer. It is he says craving. The craving for existence accompanied by delight and lust. These are all translated. Seeking delight in here and there, craving, pleasure, existence, craving, anyhow. Why do we suffer? What is the cause of it? If we watch our mind, we will see our mind from morning to night is endlessly doing what? We all have the same kind of mind. What is our mind doing all day? What's it telling us? All types of stories about what? All types of stuff. But it's, if you think, it's always about wanting, needing, right? Wanting, needing. For myself, for others, wanting people to be a certain way, wanting myself to be a certain way, wanting my day to be a certain way, wanting my life to be the way, wanting the world's life to be a certain way. We're always wanting pleasure, and wanting to avoid pain. Stop it. Get away from it. We're trying to bring these things into our life. We're trying to get these things out of our life, right? Sound familiar? Endlessly. We're endlessly dissatisfied. So many people are dissatisfied with themselves, right? They're not the person they want to be. They're dissatisfied with their mind. I don't want a mind like this. I want another kind of mind. Dissatisfied in their relationships, dissatisfied with their job, they're, dissatisfied with the weather. Always wanting things to be different. Attachment. And on the other hand, when it's working for us, then we attach to it. We want to hold on to it. Right? Does this sound familiar? I mean, it's not profound. This is just, the Buddha said that is the cause of suffering. That is why we suffer. That is why human beings cause suffering to themselves. Now, again, I'm sort of oversimplifying. We're always, and a lot of this comes back to self. We're always trying to reify ourselves. The self always wants to get noticed. The self always wants to feel successful and loved. I mean, the self has endless needs, endless wants, all the time. Right? Pleasure. Anybody like pleasure? Oh, really? Yeah. Right. Pursuit of pleasure. What is the problem? The fundamental, why is pleasure fundamentally a source of suffering? It sounds bizarre, right? No, pleasure is wonderful. But why did the Buddha say pleasure is and wanting pleasure is one of the biggest causes of suffering? Because it doesn't last. You see, there's an inherent problem with that kind of life, because we do all these things because we want to be what? Happy. I mean, it's, why do we, all the things we do, we think it'll make us happy. The problem is the happiness doesn't last. And then we're right back where we started, which is what? Yeah, right. And then we have to come up with the next thing. So it's this, and the Buddha just said this endless, it's like the rat, in chasing the cheese. It's like, have you ever watched the rat in the, it's like, it just never gets there. It gets close, but it never gets there. We want happiness, we want peace of mind, we want something permanent, but we're going about it in a way. Plus, again, when we don't get it, we're frustrated, we're angry, we're disappointed, we're hurt. So this whole cycle of human life, which most people would say is what? Normal. The Buddha said it's the cause of our suffering. Now, so you go from suffering, dukkha, now there's a cause. So now it's easy. Remove the cause and you have no more suffering. Is that logical? Yes. Right? Oh. So if we remove that endless manipulation and control of what we're trying to do in life with attachment, aversion, and the third one is just we're confused. We don't even know what's good for us or not good for us. Right? We're endlessly running around in all directions. So the Buddha called that ignorance. We're just hazy. We're confused. We can't see our life clearly. We can't even see what's causing us suffering clearly. Right? So we're always looking for things outside ourselves to end our suffering, where we don't realize our suffering is being caused by myself, by the way I'm living life, thinking about life, acting in life. So if you stop doing that, you have the end of suffering, nirvana. Right? If you're not stirring up the water, it gets calm. Right? If we're not mucking around in the water, stirring all the muck up from the bottom, it gets clear. It's very interesting. So, and then the fourth noble truth is the path. So he didn't just leave it, there's suffering, there's a cause of suffering, there's an end of suffering. Most importantly, he delineated what he called the Eightfold Path, which is a multifaceted path having to do with ethics, having to do with right action, having to do with vigilance and diligence and meditation and mindfulness and wisdom, etc. Kind of a noble path to live that has to do with actions of the way we conduct ourselves in the world. Actions of our body, actions of our speech, and most importantly, actions of our mind. And then when we commit ourselves to a transformative path, he said very clearly, you will become awakened. You will become enlightened. Because this is the path, right? It's like ABC. I mean, that may sound a little trite, but that's what he said. It's ABC. You follow the path. I'm giving you all the prerequisites, all the trainings. You just follow it, and you will transform. And so he then goes on to say that for each of these, there has to be acknowledgement of each of these four. There has to be training in each of these four. And then he says there has to be realization. So the noble truth of suffering, the first noble truth of dukkha, he says that has to be fully understood. For the origin of suffering, the origin of suffering has to be abandoned. Okay. There's just a lot of lines here. So the first noble truth has to be understood, clearly understood, And again, I would say this has to be reflected on. It's so unapparent to us. And we're also in a world where the pursuit of pleasure, the pursuit of fun, the pursuit of externalities, the pursuit of short-term solutions to our suffering, drugs, alcohol, shopping, sex, the whole thing, games, it's just like there's so much available that the ability to really stop and to see the fundamental unsatisfactoriness of this kind of life is not easy, is it? Because nobody stops, do they? Nobody stops. Just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. You tell a lot of people, oh, I'm going to go meditate. And then you tell people, oh, I'm going on a silent retreat. Now, what are most of your friends or family members or work colleagues when you tell them you're going to a 3 or a 5 silent retreat? What's their response? What? Sounds awful. Thank you, Brian. Why would you torture yourself? Right? That's the way most people respond. Because the idea of being with yourself and having to be with yourself is frightening to many people. It's very interesting. It's like we never want the music to stop, because then we might hear what's going on inside us, or feel that unsatisfactoriness. You've heard me say it, people have been around, the etymology of dukkha is a wheel that is not running true on its axle. That's dukkha. It's very interesting. It's not like it's a flat tire and you're going around. It's not that extreme. It's a wheel. Anybody have a bicycle tire that's not running true on the axle? It can still be running, but there's always friction. There's always a little wobble. right? And that's what the Buddha, that's the etymology of dukkha. It's like even when things are good, it's never runs true. We just don't get up day after day, day after day. Everything's good, all is clear, all is at ease, right? There's always a fly in the ointment, right? Yeah. So again, the first noble truth of suffering has to be fully understood. The second noble truth, the origin of suffering, has to be abandoned. The noble truth, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the third, has to be realized, right? And the noble truth of the path has to be practiced, has to be developed. So he's basically telling us that the Four Noble Truths are not just a theoretical, philosophical statement about the human condition. They're actually things to be understood, and when they're understood, they lead to the abandonment of a whole way of being in the world that causes suffering. It has to do with the realization of non-suffering and the path that allows that all to unfold. So the Four Noble Truths is a practice way. So he's telling all this to his 5 disciples, right? Remember, when they first saw him, they wouldn't get up. I don't know if you remember that last week. When they see him coming, they kind of whisper among themselves, all right, sort of like, nobody get up, nobody show him any respect, let's ignore him. He's the wimp, he's the guy who wimped out on us. Let's ignore him. But remember, as he came closer, they could tell the way he was walking, his bearing, he was different. And then when he began to talk and he gave them this teaching, as it went on, they paid more and more attention. So this is what the Buddha said. Elated, these 5 monks of the group of 5 delighted in his statement. And when this discourse was being spoken, there arose in the Venerable Kondanya, who was one of the 5, the dust-free, stainless vision of the Dhamma. And he thought and it just like lightning inside, whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation. That's it. That was his enlightenment, Kodana's enlightenment. And then there's a whole description about so many wonderful things happened, like the earth shook and all that, because this was the first transmission of the Buddha's Dharma, a living transmission. He taught what he just taught, and Kodana got it. He got, no, not intellectually, he saw it intuitively. Whatever is subject to origination is also subject to cessation. Now, does that sound very profound? Be honest, does it sound very profound? Is it like earth-shaking, transformative? Everything that comes into being, everything, is all subject to cessation. Anything that is constructed will be destructed. Anything that is born will die. Everything. World systems, planets, bodies, thoughts, feelings, perceptions, everything in the realm of our experience, everything that arises stays momentarily and then ceases. If we understood that, what would that be like? How could we be attached to anything? How could we hold on to anything when we know in and of itself nothing has any capacity to last? Everything. All our possessions, all our relationships, all the people in our life, all the people who are alive now, the ones we love, the ones we hate. Everyone, everything is subject to this same law. Thoughts, feelings, perceptions, memories, all. Right? Every thought we have arises and passes, and yet we cling to them. Every feeling state we have arises and passes. Just reflect just on today. It's now 8:16. How many momentary experiences have we had today? Just close your eyes. How many things have you seen from the moment you got up to the moment now? How many sounds have you heard? How many smells? How many odors have you smelled? How many tastes in your mouth? How many sensations in your body? How many thoughts, feelings, perceptions have arisen? If you think just your day-to-day and all the things that have arisen in the continuum of your experience, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of moment-to-moment experiences, right? Where are they all? Where are they all? And not just today. Anybody have any idea where they all are? Gone. Gone. Why are they all gone? Whatever is subject to origination, to being born, dies, cessation. Basically, he's saying this is the true nature of reality. This is the way things are. And again, this is not theological. This is not philosophical. Right? This is just based on direct experience of deep observation, investigation into the nature of reality, external and internal reality. So you can see, if the river is endlessly flowing, getting in it and asking it to stop, what do you think about that? Fruitful endeavor? No. And the river will win. And life will win. Things will unfold the way they unfold. How many times have we seen that? So again, not only is this the Buddha's first teaching, but this is the first transmission to Khandana. Khandana got his Dharma. And so that was a very significant moment. That was his first real disciple. So that, in a brief way, is the first teaching of the Buddha. Now, well, any questions? I want to go on to what's purported his second one, which is the characteristic of non-self sutta. But any questions online or in the hall about anything that's been said so far? As I said last week, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of part of the Pali Canon, long, short. And again, there's no comprehensive. It's like altogether the canon is on everything, because they're all responses that the Buddha had to people asking him questions or him giving teaching. So as a body of teachings, the whole canon is available, but they're all, each sutra takes a different piece of it. So a lot of repetition, crossover, sometimes there's contradiction. So any questions? Yes.
I think you sort of answered it, but I'll ask anyways. If somebody wants to study these sutras in a little more detail.
So if the question is, Will is asking if somebody wanted to study these more detailed discussion. Well, there is nice that there is a book like this called The Buddha's Words, an anthology of discourses from the Pali Canon by Bhikkhu Bodhi, who's an American, actually monk for decades and decades, who's also a great translator. So he put together this.
Sutras, is there like an order to it?
Yes, there's an order. They're different. They're nikayas. There are different bodies. There's middle discourses, long discourses. So they're all numerical, and they can be read. And there are, if you do a little research, you can find out like which are the major ones, that most people study, right? Okay. Yeah, so I'm just sort of picking out, the ones that described his enlightenment, his spiritual search. I began with his first discourse. Now I'm going to go to his second one, but probably in the next 2 weeks I will pick some key ones that probably came later. Yes, Nancy?
Knowing that everything is
Mm-hmm.
fleeting,
Yes.
impermanent, instead of clinging, is it a wholesome reaction to appreciate the moments as they whir by you because you know that they're not going to last? I mean, is that a form of clinging, or is that?
You sort of so the question is appreciating the moments, but you see, do you appreciate disease? See, what do we appreciate? So Nancy's saying is appreciating the moment, but yeah, is it good to be appreciative and grateful? But if you think about it, appreciation stands in opposition to not appreciation.
I guess not appreciate as much as experience it, let it in.
Yeah, well,
Suffering.
right.
You say, oh, it's going to go away, but shouldn't you feel it? I mean, shouldn't you?
We'll get into this. Yeah. We want to be fully alive.
Yeah.
We want to be fully alive. We want to be fully present, but we don't want to suffer.
Right.
And we suffer because we cling. We suffer because we push away. We suffer because we're always at war with reality.
But just being aware of what's going on.
Yeah, to be aware, but just awareness, as you see, is in the Buddha taught a path, of living, of ethics, of right action, of being energetic in nurturing the wholesome and not nurturing, because it's also about wanting to change one's karma. Because the mind we have now and the life we have now is the product of the past, right? We are, each of us, the heirs of our karma, of the actions of our past, of our body, speech, and mind. So we want to transform that. There's compassion, there's loving kindness, there's the path has many different practices. But the main thing is to end our war with reality and accept this is the nature. As long as we have this yearning for certain things to be permanent, we will suffer. As long as we have this desire to get certain things, certain people out of our life, we're going to suffer because too many variables. All have their own causes and conditions. Right? Everything has their own causes and conditions. Any questions? Did that answer your question? Yeah. Again, as you know, we do a lot of teaching. I'm here just kind of giving the pith of the suttas. And anybody online have anything? Anything not? Yes, Bill?
Yeah, the question is, if we have the Four Noble Truths in the Eightfold Path, why do we need the sutras?
Why do we need all these sutras?
That's the question.
Maybe you don't. I mean, the sutras are the Buddha's teachings in many different ways. You mean, does one have to study all the sutras? No, not of course. I mean, the most important thing is to practice, right? And obviously, really investigating deeply, reflecting deeply on these first three truths, and then, walking the path, the Eightfold Path, that's the path. Yeah, that's fine. We can stop here. But there are lots of other teachings which also help us on the way. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that we practice. Reflect and practice. And not overwhelm ourselves with intellectual knowledge. Yeah, I agree. So this is the second sutta, the second teaching the Buddha gave. And again, it says, at the time the Buddha was staying near Varanasi, Sarnath, at the deer park, and he addressed the group of 5 mendicants. These are his 5 buddies. Now they're his buddies again. So again, he calls them mendicants. This is a translation. They're really homeless ones. We're householders. We have homes. We have homes, we have jobs, we have, relationships, we get haircuts, we wear clothes, we're householders. They were in India at that time, there were 2 paths. One, you're a householder. And the interesting thing is, maybe if I have time next week, I'll give you some example. Lots of the Buddha's Pali teachings are geared toward householders. He talks to men and women and children about, how to relate to each other and how to be respectful. He talks to kings, how to be a noble king. I mean, there's lots of the teachings he gave which were very much, around householder life. But again, here he's addressing these mendicants. They have given that all up, right? They don't have a home, they don't have food, they just beg for their food. They're totally dependent on others. They're wanderers. So now the Buddha he calls them mendicants. They say, Venerable Sir. And the Buddha said this, mendicants, form is not self. For if form were self, it wouldn't lead to affliction. And you could compel form, such as, may my form be like this, may it not be like that. But because form is not self, it leads to affliction. And you can't compel form. May my form be like this, may it be like that. And then he goes on, so we're talking about what's called the 5 skandhas. In Buddhist kind of the analysis of what it means to be a human being is made up of body and mind, right? Body is form, right? And that can be for the body of our form, but it could also mean all the forms, anything that is solid, that has a physical materiality to it, is the world of form. Mind is immaterial, according to Buddhist psychology, because you can't, this, or I can go like this, you see. But try to grab a thought. Try to grab a memory. Can you grab it and kind of, No, it's immaterial. It disappears. So, in Buddhist what may be called the psychophysical, what a human being is, their body and mind, and within the mind, there are the senses that make connection with the things we see, hear, smell, da-da-da-da. Then there are thoughts, there are perceptions, there are memories, there are mental formations, there's consciousness, there's awareness. There are all these things that make up me and you, okay? He says, form is not self. Now, when he says self, he doesn't mean, so it's an interesting thing. He's really talking to the Vedic tradition at that time, when people thought that everyone has a permanent soul. Like there's a permanent soul inside all of us, right? And it's sort of, it has its own form, its own formation, and it's like our true self. This is what I really am. But he's saying, no, this is based on his realization. You remember he said, everything is insubstantial. Everything is impermanent, right? So, self, there is not anything called a permanent, solid self. But then this is just kind of logically. He says, but if, the essence of who I am myself is the same as my body, right, then I could make my body do what it wanted, right? Because it's me, right? I'm my body. Okay. What do you want to do with it? Can you make it like this? Can you make it become like that? Right? Stay forever young, yeah. My body's myself. You see what I'm saying? If the self and your body were the same, right, your body could listen to you. Yeah, stay healthy. Stay strong. Don't get sick. Feel good. Yeah, no, don't get pain. Yeah. Can we do that? No. Because we are not our bodies. Our body has its own karma, its own causes and conditions. Right. Then he says, feeling is not self. Perceptions are not self. Choices are not self. Consciousness is not self. Can you control your thoughts from morning till night? Anybody ever try that? No. Can you control what arises? What's going to arise next? A thought, a feeling, right? A perception, a memory, sensation in our body. Can we control it? It doesn't mean we can't respond to it when it arises, but can we control it? No. All these things have a life of their own. They're all in movement. They're all in process. And the idea that there's some solid self that can control everything, the Buddha said, is not true. You cannot compel your body or your mind to be exactly the form or shape or content that you want it to be, just by ordering it. Now, practice is about, over time, changing. But if it was really me, I could order it. Right? It's me. It sounds kind of obvious, but again, the implications are quite profound. Because then he goes on to say, what do you think, mendicants? Is form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, sir. But if it's impermanent, is it suffering or happiness? It is suffering, sir. Remember, he says, the fact that everything is impermanent becomes a source of suffering for human beings. Why is that? Because we want things to be permanent. We want things to be solid. So form is impermanent. Therefore, to grasp at it leads to suffering. Are feelings permanent or impermanent? They are impermanent. Therefore, to grasp at them will lead to suffering. Choices, consciousness. So he says, if everything is impermanent, and if everything, because of it, is impermanence, cannot give any consistent state of happiness and well-being, so therefore it becomes a source of suffering. If everything is perishable, can I really say that any of this is mine, any of this is myself? No, we cannot. So you should see any kind of form at all, past, present, or future, internal, external, coarse or fine, inferior, exterior, superior, far or near, all form, with right understanding, this is not mine, I am not this is not myself. I know the hour grows late, but this was his second teaching. Anybody here ever suffer? Anybody here ever been unhappy? Why have you been unhappy? Thanks. Because you didn't get, and what you wanted, and the self that wanted it, in that moment you thought these were real things that you could get and you could control. Right? The Buddha's telling you, Bill, don't even go there. You're just going to cause yourself suffering. I mean, do you understand the profundity? It sounds so simple. But it's like once we get, it's all in flux. It's all in flux. And I need to really discern the areas of this endless open process that I can somewhat, right? I often use the analogy of, like anybody ever kayak in white water? Anybody ever kayak? Yeah. I mean, the river, the rocks, the force of the river, that's all given, isn't it? Right? The only thing, your only maneuverability is what? The paddle, right? See, that's what he's saying, The river, the whole thing, this whole life that we're moving through, all these kind of variables, has its own energy. Right? This world that we were all born into, that's unfolding right now, has its own karma that's unfolding. Old stuff, new stuff, it's all kinds of stuff, and we have a paddle. That's our practice, and how skillful we are at our paddle is whether we end up on the rocks, or end up floating down the river, right? Anybody ever fall out of a canoe or a kayak in a white water? What's it like? Breathtaking. I think you're saying that now that you're out. Yeah, and that's what happens for many of us. We just get banged up, right? Because we don't know how to, how to go down this life river with skill and understanding and clarity, and right. So this is so hard for us because we are so identified. I am my body, right? We look in the mirror. Anybody here of her age? Anybody here of her age? Yeah. When you look in the mirror, what do you see? Somebody you want to see? No. I'm joking. But you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I mean, people don't want to look in the mirror because they don't like what they see. They see a form and they think it's them. They're just seeing a physical body. It's not me. Right? This body was created by who? Did anybody create their own body? Dion, did you create your body? Who created your body? Your ancestors. Right? And who created their bodies? I mean, all of a sudden you go like, whew, endless variables, right? And yet you look in the mirror and you think, oh, this is me. You see how ridiculous that is? Yeah. When we're looking in the mirror, we're seeing this manifestation of the physicality of all our ancestors. That's who's looking back at us. True? I mean, and yet we go, this is my body. You sit in meditation. You observe your mind. thoughts, feelings, perceptions arising and passing away. Where's it all coming from? Where are all our thoughts and our feelings and our perceptions? Where are they all coming from? What? Our mind, right. But how did they get in there? You know? Experiences? Just your own experiences all by yourself? Or have you had endless experiences with all other kinds of people, including spending the first 18 years, with your parents, with your family, going to school? Right? I mean, where did this all come from? Right? All the experiences, many of them we've had, most of them we've had with other people. So they've been variables in our experience. So to even say my experience is not true either, because we most of our experiences are shared. Right? There are so many variables. That's why Thich Nhat Hanh, he calls this, in Buddhism it's called interconnection, dependent origination. Thich Nhat Hanh, coined the phrase interbeing. We inter-are with all life. Right? I'm not even talking about the natural world, which we are all, product of, and the food we've eaten, and, So when you see this all, this is not mine, I am not this is not myself, a learned, noble disciple grows disillusioned with form, feeling, perceptions, choices, and consciousness. Being disillusioned, desire fades away, they are freed. When they're freed, they know they're freed. What does this mean for lay people? When he says that we grow disillusioned, it means we've given up our illusions that by grasping at life, grasping at my body, attaching to my body, and doing all the things we just talked about, that I will get to be a happy, calm, peaceful human being who will not have any afflictive mind states. I've realized it's never going to work. I'm disillusioned, you see. I've given up my illusions. That's a path to happiness. But at the same time, the Buddha has elucidated a very clear path that does lead to nirvana. Nirvana, not like some altered state, but nirvana means the end of suffering. Right? I can live in this world. I can live in the world of relationships. I can live in the world of thoughts, feelings, perceptions. I can live in the world of bodies and forms. I can live in the world of sickness, old age, and death, and be at peace. Right? Remember, when we're talking about the Buddha teaching here, and talking about his great enlightenment, we're talking about what? He still had 2 eyes, he had 2 ears, he had a nose, he had a mouth, right? He still ate food. He still went to the bathroom, right? He was still a total human being. He did die. So he stayed a full participant in the unfolding of what it means to be a human being, but the way he went about it changed. And that's really kind of his middle way, you see. His middle way is, we can live in this world and navigate a path through all the contradictions of this world. We can navigate a path that we can see clearly, that is clearly marked out, and will take us to where we want to go. That's his Dharma. That's the Buddha's Dharma. That's his teaching. Well, it's 8:45. Any questions? I mean, any of this kind of sound kind of like Over the top? Well, it is over the top, but yes, Bill.
People talk about Buddha nature and my true self.
So people talk about Buddha nature and my true self.
And ignoring the definitions of those terms, which we could talk about.
Yeah.
But there's often this air of these are points of permanency in the ocean.
Okay, so this is important. So in these early suttas, the Buddha does not talk about Buddha nature. The Buddha does not talk about true self, right? You heard what he says. There's no thing. Stop identifying with anything, right? I mean, this was quite radical because in his Vedic culture, right, which believed in reincarnation, right, they believed that there was some kind of essence, soul, atma. So this is anatma, atma, that kept reincarnating. The Buddha, in his great insight into his own mind, said, I cannot find a trace of that even. That's why he says, there's no soul, there's no self. There's just this unfolding of causes and conditions. Right. Now, centuries later, these ideas of Buddha nature and true self, and they have meaning, right, began to be developed. But you're absolutely right, the danger is that you begin to think that there's something. That's why you find Zen saying, your true self is your no self. Or you have the Heart Sutra going, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, so you kind of break out of all that. But you can see in these earliest teachings of the Buddha, there's no talk about any kind of true nature. Okay. Any other questions? Anybody online? Will?
So going back to the Four Noble Truths,
Mm-hmm.
attachment and craving, attachment and clinging can lead to suffering. But desire, just desire in and of itself, I don't think he's saying all desire. I mean, we desire. Desires are.
Yeah, that's important to understand. So when you're talking to a monastic, what's the nature of a monastic life? They've renounced the world, right? They've renounced relationships, familial relationships, right? They have no career, they have no money, they've renounced all that. So their path is the path of renunciation, which is a nice, makes it easy. I just renounce all desire because I will not participate in that world. Right? But that's not a good teaching for us, is it? Because we live in the world of desire. Is that clear? So, we have to learn, just like you say, if a desire arises in my mind, but I see it as a desire and I don't follow it, it can do me no harm, can it? As well as there's a hierarchy of desires. I mean, to desire to be free, to desire to be of benefit to other people, to be a desire to be of help, those are good desires. Right? So, but you understand people who have endless desire for things or money or power over these things, these lead to suffering. So it's not that like desire is bad, but that most of the things that people desire are only leading them to suffering. Have you ever desired anything? Really, really wanted it? How does your mind feel? Peaceful? No. So again, there's a sense that the cultivation of a peaceful, calm mind is what we want to cultivate. So the problem with really grasping and desiring and wanting or needing is that it unsettles the mind. It's not like it's inherently bad, but it unsettles the mind. And it can ultimately lead to frustration when we don't get what we desire. And when we get what, have you ever gotten what you desired? How does it feel? Good. And how long does that good feeling last? See, that's the problem. You see, the Buddha didn't say like desire is bad. He's saying, just watch it and see, does it really deliver what you want, which is happiness? So it's very important that we understand we're not getting some kind of theology or some kind of divine revelation. We're really getting the experience of somebody who just really very deeply observed life within himself and around him and came up to certain truths, but they're true about life, you see. They're true about life, about the human experience. So therefore we should be able to test it. So all these teachings that you've heard me share from the Buddha, you should be able to test it in your own life to see whether they're valid or not. You know, if they're not valid, you don't have to follow them. I mean, there's no, again, this is not divine revelation, you know. So actually there's a sutra maybe we'll read, a very famous sutra where the Buddha basically tells his monks, don't accept my teaching because you love me, respect me, think I'm the Buddha, whatever you think. Test it for your own experience. Test it to your own, analytical minds. Use your good mind, to see whether this is valid, what I'm teaching. Okay? Is it too much? Is it okay? It's okay? Thank you, everyone. Let me just share the merit. Whatever benefit may have come to us tonight from our sharing of the Dharma, may it be shared equally with all whom we encounter, whether near or far away, and may its effects ripple continuously to aid in the healing and transformation of the world. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening, and we will continue our dipping our toe into the Buddhist suttas next Tuesday. And there is a day of mindfulness on Saturday, and that's all online, and plus all the other things we do are all on the website. Thank you, everyone.